Hello and welcome to another episode of Judge of Character. As always, I'm your host, Steve. Well, kids, it's October, and you know what that means. It's the most wonderful time of the year again!
It's the most wonderful time.
Sorry about that, folks. Won't happen again. Anyway, as I was saying, it's October, which means it's time that we turn our attention towards those characters who thrive on scaring our collective pants off. And since last year we took a look at a couple of classic horror movie characters, I thought this year we'd move forward in time to, say the 1980s, when slasher films were the order of the day. But what exactly is a slasher film, and what in the world does it have to do with the character we're looking at tonight? A slasher film, in the simplest terms, is a horror movie where the scares come from the brutal and often gory deaths of the on-screen characters. Slasher films often have a very simplistic formula. Get a bunch of young, nubile kids, put them somewhere isolated from outside help or adult supervision so that they can do whatever they want, and then turn loose a psychotic killer who proceeds to off them in numerous and imaginative ways. The formula hasn't changed very often, but then it doesn't really need to, as proven by the constant returns that almost all slasher films manage to get. Now, slasher films had their big heyday back in the 1980s, but you might be surprised to learn that slasher films are actually almost as old as film itself. Slasher films can trace their origins all the way back to the Théâtre de Grand Guignol, a theatre in Paris that specialized in horror stories and had some of the earliest uses of special effects like blood. From there, you can follow through history all the way to the modern era, where we saw the genre take on new life with the release of films such as Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween. But a little film called Friday the 13th, released in 1980, about a camp in New Jersey and the homicidal maniac stalking it, would change the way slasher films were both looked at and how they were executed. No pun intended. Friday the 13th would also give us one of, if not the most iconic horror movie characters in history. So strap in, grab your machetes, and don your hockey masks, because tonight, we're learning more about Jason Voorhees. Now, before I can start digging into the character proper, I have to talk a little bit about the Friday franchise as a whole. The original Friday the 13th premiered May 9th, 1980, and was the child of Sean S. Cunningham. Originally conceived as a project to keep his writer's energy up for a TV show, Friday the 13th was never meant to be a big production. And yet with almost no effort, the story of camp counselors getting brutally offed one after the other became immensely popular, resulting in a sequel immediately getting greenlit. There was just one problem. You see, for those of you who aren't as big of horror nerds as I am, Jason wasn't actually a killer in the original film. That was his mother, Pamela Voorhees. Perhaps some explanation is in order here. The story is simple enough. Several years before the start of the movie, a young mentally handicapped child drowns in Crystal Lake, which the camp is named after. This happened because the two counselors who were supposed to be watching him were instead off making the beast with two backs. Not long after, the said counselors come down with a sudden case of death, and the camp is closed down. When the movie begins, it's now several years later, and a fresh group of teens are trying to reopen the camp. As can be expected, it doesn't end so well for them. Anyway, if you haven't figured it out yet, Jason was that little boy, and his mother Pamela was the one doing all the killing. But just because Jason wasn't the killer in the first film, doesn't mean he didn't make an appearance. Oh, over 30 years later, and that scene still gets me. Oh, Christ. Anyway, the problem I mentioned earlier was that since they killed Mrs. Pamela Voorhees at the end of the first movie, who could they possibly get to be the killer in the second one? Oh, don't look at me like that. You know damn well who it is. You saw the thumbnail. Yes, even though he was considered dead, Jason took over as the killer in Friday the 13th Part 2. An explanation has never been officially given, so most fans assume he somehow survived drowning and just lived in the woods for several years, sort of like Cropsy. If this were any other movie, I'd question the hell out of it and say that it sucks. This is Friday the 13th, so who cares? With the release of Part 2, Jason quickly became the face of the franchise, so to speak, and would subsequently secure his place as the king of slasher films for years to come. So what exactly is it that makes him so damned memorable as a character? Yes, it's true. Jason has no real personality to speak of. For the most part, he's just a lumbering, indestructible murder machine. But what little personality he does have is worth talking about, if only briefly. Throughout the films, Jason's mindset consists mostly of kill, kill, kill. However, there are a few times when he does show signs of humanity. Unfortunately, this is stunted due in part to the fact that Jason is retarded. What? Oh, come on! I'm not using it to be mean here, I'm being literal! He really is mentally retarded! It's not just a slur, you know! Jason's mental retardation obviously makes him a very simple-minded fellow, which only exacerbates his lack of a full and developed personality. This is only made worse later in the franchise after his death and resurrection. Resurrection? Hot damn! Now there's a religion I like! Normally, the lack of a solid personality makes for a bad character, but since this is a horror movie icon we're talking about here, it's not as big of a deal. Plus, it actually works out in regards to an element I'll discuss later, that of Jason being a symbol. But does Jason really lack a personality? Or is it so buried beneath the murder and mayhem that we just don't see it as well? Well, kiddies, you might be surprised to learn that, despite all of his homicidal tendencies, Jason actually does have a deeper element to him, and it revolves entirely around his mother. Yes, kids, at his cold, blackened heart, Jason is just a great big old mama's boy. A mama's boy that will fucking crush your skull in, but a mama's boy nonetheless. In fact, his killing is partly spurred by his love for his mother. Remember, he may have the body of an adult, but Jason still runs on the mind of a child, a mentally handicapped one at that. Jason does what he does because he wants to please his mother, and it's entirely possible that he may believe to a certain extent that killing will even bring her back. This adds an interesting emotional complexity to Jason. True, the horrific nature of his crimes is pretty obvious, but it's also obvious that he does it all for his mom. So while he's not exactly earning brownie points for being a good guy, we at least have a better understanding of why he does what he does. Oh God, could you imagine what he would do for Mother's Day? On second thought, I don't want to know. Instead, let's focus on what everybody knows and loves about Jason. The kills! Since he took up the machete in Friday the 13th Part 2, Jason has racked up over 150 on-screen kills in his cinematic lifetime. And that's not including victims killed off-screen and in official spin-off work, such as books and comics. With so much blood and gore to go around, there's simply no way I can just sit here and talk about all the different ways Jason has killed people. So instead, I think I'll just show you some of them. Popcorn ready? Go! Look at that! Oh, look at that! Stop! Jason didn't kill him, that was his mother's work. Get it off screen!
Yoink!
Alright, now continue. Damn it. Well, this seems as good a place as any to take a break while I clean up. We'll be right back, folks.
Don't go anywhere. Judge of Character will be right back. We now return to Judge of Character.
Welcome back, folks. I assure you the place is clean. Well, we've now seen his best kills, and we actually understand a little bit more about his personality. But what else is there that makes Jason such a great character? How about the people who've played him, his actors? Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but Steve, Jason doesn't talk, and you yourself said that he doesn't have much of a personality. So, how can an actor's portrayal have anything to do with how good of a character he is? Well, the answer is simple, and I'll let Ursula tell you for me.
And don't underestimate the importance of body language. Ha!
Thank you, Ursula. As she says, body language is important, and in the case of Jason, it's doubly so. When a character doesn't speak, they often have to rely on facial expressions to get the point across. But when your face is covered by a mask, you have to learn to use your body to convey meaning. While Jason is a simple character, you still need to have an actor who can properly convey that murderous intent through his body language, how he carries himself, how he moves, etc. All the actors over the years have brought different physical takes to the character, and with each movie, these are added to. To save time, we'll talk about the more recent actors to play him. And let's start with everyone's favorite, the man who everyone pretty much thinks of as Jason, Kane Hodder. For many fans, film stuntman Kane Hodder is Jason Voorhees. First taking up the mask in Part 7, Kane is the only person to play the role of Jason more than once, playing him a grand total of 4 times. Wow, he must really like being Jason. Or has latent homicidal tendencies. Kane has brought much of the behaviors and mannerisms we love about Jason, including his quirk of turning his head before moving the rest of his body. He's also responsible for keeping Jason from getting too evil, by vetoing any ideas where Jason harmed animals or kids, although this really only applies to the films where he was Jason. I've got nothing for examples where he did do this sort of stuff. But for as good as he was, Kane simply couldn't play Jason forever, and when it came time to film the much-anticipated Freddy vs. Jason, he was replaced with Ken Kirzinger. Which is fine. Nothing wrong with that at all. So, what did Ken bring to the role? With Freddy vs. Jason, it was decided that Jason should be a little more emotional this time around. This was done to separate him from Freddy Krueger, thereby making him less of a monster, while still allowing for all of the gore we fans love. And while I'm obviously sore that Kane wasn't in the mask for this film, I can't deny that Kirzinger did a good job. He really does get across the more subtle emotional aspects of the character, making him somewhat more relatable. To a point. And then there was the remake. While opinions on the 2009 remake are polarizing, one can't help but agree that Derek Mears' take on the classic horror icon is a fantastic one. For one, his overall presence was much more frightening, making Jason feel like a real threat. And then there's the fact that Jason was running in that movie. Plus, his version of Jason was more cunning, and not just an invulnerable tank of meat that absorbed damage like a sponge. This Jason actually dug a tunnel system and made traps to catch his prey. Plus, he was fucking running! For those of you who are a little confused as to why I'm so heavily focused on this, allow me to explain. You see, in the older movies, Jason almost never ran. He didn't need to. No matter how fast you were going, he would always catch your ass. So when I first saw the trailers for this movie, and I saw Jason hauling ass like a track star, I nearly shit myself. So, what about Jason as a symbol? I mentioned this earlier. Over time, Jason Voorhees has become less of a man and more of a symbol. While he's still a simple horror movie character, Jason can be seen as a sort of allegory for any number of things. These can include, but are not limited to, ideas such as karma, consequences, and even death itself. There's even a moral element here, since most of Jason's victims are teenagers who go off and do drugs, have premarital sex, and are generally little asswipes. The idea of Jason as a symbol is helped by the lack of a strong personality and his seemingly unstoppable momentum. To this, Jason is more of a force of nature than anything else. Last but certainly not least, there's the cultural impact he's left. Jason and the Friday the 13th franchise were instantly popular, and have remained so ever since, despite what some critics may say. This popularity can be attributed to any number of things, such as the films being a form of catharsis, but it's generally accepted that Jason is the driving force for the franchise's refusal to die off. In fact, Jason is so much of an icon that his presence has been felt in a number of other works, especially in the slasher genre. In fact, let's try a little experiment. I want you to close your eyes. No, I'm being serious. Close your eyes. I promise I'm not going to do anything. Alright, are they closed? Okay. In your mind's eye, I want you to conjure up an image of the most stereotypical kind of serial killer slasher film maniac you can come up with. I'll wait. You've got it? Is it firmly in your head? Okay. If he's wearing a hockey mask of any kind, then congratulations, you have now seen firsthand exactly the kind of impact Jason has left on the horror genre. Make no mistake, Jason has remained a popular horror icon for a good reason. Whether it's because of how he offs his prey, or because we see the sensitive little boy inside, we can't help but enjoy a good Friday the 13th movie when he shows up. After all, why else do they keep making them? In any case, it's plainly evident that he's not going away anytime soon, so if you've never experienced him before in your life, do so now. Just stay the hell away from the NES game. You'll thank me for it. In any case, I'm your host Steve, reminding all of you to stay in character.
Ha 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 ha!